Welcome to the Habitat podcast.
My name's Nathan.
And I'm Kaylin. And we're two guys having a chat about our habitat. Yoo-hoo! Nathan, how will we not call?
Kaylin, I do not know. How will we not call?
Let's find out. Woo! On this week's episode. Enjoy.
Oh, yeah, nice. Nice little coffee cup holder.
Are we starting?
Yeah, we are recording.
You're recording.
How you been, Nathan?
Good, mate. How are you?
Yeah, good.
Is that good range?
It's good range.
Good
What are we doing?
We're being silly buggers.
What is the start of this episode?
It's not even a minute in.
Yeah.
Enjoy the show.
Yeah. And that's it.
That's the episode done.
Yeah.
Just making weird sounds.
Yep. And welcome to
We've
Weird
gone
Sound.
to a whole new level of talking about our habitat.
Yeah. We ain't even having a chat anymore.
We have become the habitat.
Yeah.
Whatever that means.
What? What that? Yeah.
Good.
Okay. Yeah. Good.
How are you?
I am busy but good.
Busy but good.
Busy but good. Yeah. So I like being busy because I'm a busy personality and I like to keep things going in my mind.
Yep.
But
keep the cogs going.
yeah, I just feel like I'm on top of things. But the trick about that is you have to be on top of it, because if you're not on top of it, for me, then my busyness just becomes overwhelming. So I love it when I'm busy but on top of it. I hate it when I'm busy and don't feel on top of it.
Okay. What does being on top of it look like?
Just aware of what's coming up, what I'm doing,
Yep.
actioning things. I'm on top of it.
Yep.
Generally on top of it.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's fun.
Yeah.
All right. What are we talking about today?
Well, energy.
Energy.
Yeah. So I personally am feeling a lack thereof, hence the coffee this morning.
Well, I don't know about the start of the podcast, but that was high energy.
that was it. I'm done.
That was high energy.
That was
so that's
all the
that's
energy I
actually
have.
a great intro.
Yeah, true. Energy, yeah. No, I'm talking about...
Okay, we're talking about energy today.
Yeah, not personal energy. More to do with the future of energy.
The future of energy.
Yeah, and because we're at this impasse, aren't we? Like, we've already talked about this impasse of the world is changing. We have this movement towards a sustainable future. So what does that mean for energy? What does that mean for where are we going to get our energy from?
Yeah.
Basically.
And specifically, you're talking about energy being in the form of electricity or like power, like to power our environment, or is that like food energy?
Yeah, specifically electricity.
Yeah.
But that comes in many different forms.
Yeah.
As well.
Yeah.
Yeah. But what's your take on where we are at today with energy?
Yeah, I definitely think we're at a crossroads at the moment between green energy and sort of using up natural resources energy, or that finite amount of energy, as in coal and fossil fuels. I think people love the idea of green energy, and it seems like a very attainable goal at the moment, but there's things that are in place at the moment that are stopping us from doing that.
Yeah. And by things, what do you...
Well, like legislations, government availability, price, economics.
Yeah.
So...
And big business, I would say, as well.
Yeah. I think there's definitely an attraction towards it, because who doesn't want to like live in a world that doesn't produce, plumes of smoke?
Yes.
Just by...
I love that word. Plumes.
Plumes. Yeah, it's a nice word, but when you think of it,
it's not a
in
nice,
terms of like
nice
the visual of it. That's not a
yeah.
nice place to live. But
yeah.
So yeah, I think there's that attraction towards it, but and for me personally, I love the idea of green energy. Just
Well, that's the thing is a lot of us do. A lot of us love the idea of green energy and what that means and how exciting that could be and how we could live in a world where energy is cheap, reliable and green, that it's completely sustainable. And that's really the ultimate utopia when it comes to energy, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's kind of what we're...
You've hit the nail on the head with those like 3 principles. And there are ways of achieving that. I think it's just having that collective consciousness and that collective desire to go towards that.
Yeah, I personally think that there is quite a large movement towards that already, and that there is that collective consciousness. It's in everyone's mind. If you ask people, what they think of energy or electricity, straight away you brought up coal and the movement towards sustainability. That's on a lot of people's minds, and I think that's a great thing. Some people have other opinions than others on coal and whatnot, especially when it comes to economy. But yeah, look, where the problem lies is with our energy on demand issue. So we have this problem where we have a need for energy on demand. So we need energy now and we need to operate now. Our businesses, our day in and day out activity require energy. They require electricity. Okay, and we've become so dependent on electricity or energy in general that it is up there with our dependencies as a need. A need dependency just as much as food, water and shelter. Yeah. So for our society to operate, we need food, water, shelter, basic needs, and energy, electricity.
All right. So it's in its own category now.
It's its own. When you take a step back and you look at it, imagine society without energy in general. Yeah. So either free-flowing electricity, battery storage, anything. If you imagine that, we just wouldn't be operating. It'll be the dark ages again. And society wouldn't be as it is today and as advanced, both, because when we don't have to think about how do we get warm, how do we cook our dinner, how do we do these things, it allows us room to think about social issues and it allows us to start tackling other problems. So you remove that security, and then what do you get? You all of a sudden have a problem that you constantly have to be solving. So we have this huge dependency on energy, and the reason why we've gone through the Industrial Revolution 1, we've gone through Industrial Revolution 2, and the outcome of that is for constant electricity, a constant flow of electricity. But now we're at this impasse where we're like, okay, we understand, because electricity is relatively new in the scheme of things, the scheme of planet Earth. Humanity is relatively new, and electricity is relatively new within that, within the last couple hundred years. So for us we've now kind of, it's like what we said last week, we kind of have this thing where we do things and then we realize it's a problem, so then we take a step back and go, we need to fix it. Yeah. And that's where we're at with electricity. We realize we can't depend on these things like coal, which is cheap and easily accessible to run electricity because it's not sustainable.
I think that's to bring it back to a point you made, and it's a really great point. It's, energy allows us to have that freedom of thought, that creativity in our thought. So it allows us to think, okay, I don't need to worry about how I'm going to cook my meal. I don't need to build a fire. It allows us that time. It affords us time. Yeah,
it's like, okay, it allows us room in our brain to be like, how can we be more diverse?
Right, and time to think of new systems of operating. And now it's getting to the point where our thought is becoming aware of the dangers of continuing down the route of our current systems. Yeah, I mean, and now we have to let's rethink this. Yeah. And with our last episode, we have to rethink these things because we're becoming aware of this bigger picture outside of ourselves,
Yeah.
we're getting past that survival mode.
Yes.
That primal mode.
Yes, and that's exactly
survivalistic.
where we're at.
Yeah.
Yeah, is
So-
we've moved past that survival mode, and electricity has allowed us to do that. Therefore, we are just as dependent on that as we are on clean water, fresh water, food, and shelter.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the problem here is, okay, how do we do this? How do we switch to a carbon neutral or zero energy consumption, zero energy embodied? That doesn't make any sense. But how do we switch from carbon neutral carbon neutral energy consumption to this new,
like a net zero.
exactly, yeah. How do we get there?
Yep.
How do we get there?
So that's the goal.
That's the goal, and it's also the biggest problem at the moment.
Okay.
And it's one of the biggest problems humanity is
Why would it be a problem?
because of the hurdles in which we stand between us and getting there. So it's a great idea, and we need to get there. We all scientists, or majority of scientists, agree that we need to get there for the planet to be able to sustain humanity and life, because we are the largest contributors to climate change, and through that is our use of energy. So there's been studies showing that Industrial Revolution 1, Revolution 2 has shown the spike in greenhouse gas emissions basically going up, temperatures rising, ice melting, polar bears stranded, etc. So our energy consumption is really important in this game, basically. Yeah. So we know that we have to go to carbon neutral energy, but at the very latest, we know that we have to get there by the end of the century to mitigate the worst climate change will bring. Okay, so if we get there by the end of the century, at the very latest, then we will hopefully mitigate, on current modelling, will hopefully mitigate the worst which climate change can bring.
Wow.
The worst. So you got to think about what happens between now and the worst.
Yeah.
There's a lot in between there. So that's why a lot of countries are setting goals like 2030, 2040, 2050 in trying to be 50%, 60%, 70%.
Yep.
So I've, in my research, basically Stanford University in the United States has done a lot of research in this area. And in particular, Professor Stephen Chu, he's a physics of molecular and cellular physiology at Stanford University. So he's the guy who said that. He's basically said that at the very latest of the century, we need to mitigate. At the very latest, we need to have mitigated the worst of climate change by the end of the century by switching to carbon neutral. But this transition isn't easy. So there's two goals, and essentially it's short term and long term. Because if we continue to go on the path of slowly switching over to carbon neutral, which is very possible, but it's we can just say tomorrow we're going to go to 100% carbon neutral. Let's build the infrastructure, and it's done. Okay.
Yep.
But then you have the energy on demand problem. So the energy on demand problem is with current technology and current resources, we don't have the capacity to be able to store enough electricity when the sun doesn't shine for 2 weeks or the wind doesn't blow for a month. We don't have that capacity. So up to 75%, it's viable in this day and age. Beyond 75% to the 100% point, the extra 25%, that's where energy on demand comes in. And that's where we need to have an offset. Okay.
I've always thought about that. I'm like, we've got this giant nuclear fusion in the sky. It's, that's just beaming down energy.
Yeah.
Isn't it as simple as just rolling out acres and acres of solar power, say for instance,
Yeah.
And what happens to that? Like, can't we achieve that? So that's really interesting that it's more of a storage and capacity. And I'd imagine with that, there's economic challenges as well.
And
how do we
let's
get the resources to fund this.
exactly.
Who's going to do it?
And that aside, there's other challenges beyond that, and that is basically comes down to storage and this energy on demand problem that we face. Because, like we talked about at the start of this chat, is we have a need for energy, and it needs to be readily available then and now.
Yep.
But so if we don't have that, therefore we start the breakdown of the fabric of society, because we all of a sudden are switching in and out of blackouts, we can't depend on this energy. And then you can say, okay, well, why don't people harness their own energy on site and collect it themselves? But they still face the same problem. If the sun hasn't shone in that location, therefore that region isn't getting energy for, or experiencing blackouts, they're going to face the same problem, okay? Because it comes down to location.
Right.
And energy can only travel a certain distance before it loses its velocity and
I suppose we have built this system of a hierarchical, energy provider, greater systems providing energy for the whole instead of us taking ownership of our own energy.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So to call on to your point about, why don't we just all take ownership of our own energy consumption and energy creation to take care of ourselves.
Yeah.
But that's not the system. It's almost like we have to go back.
But then again,
to the person.
Yeah, and then if you send the responsibility to the individual, then that individual is going to need to seek this technology from somebody else. They're not going to create it themselves. So there's still that demand on an external influence to be able to help them.
Yeah, and I suppose not everyone's an engineer that can.
Yeah, exactly.
That
Create photovoltaics and whatnot. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, not everyone has that knowledge, and I suppose that knowledge is very under wraps at the moment. It's how do we actually create energy?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So Mark, I think, forgive me, Mark, if you are listening, but Professor Mark Zuback, I think his last name is, or Zoback. He's also from Stanford University. He's a geophysicist at...
Stanford's got it going on.
Stanford has really investigated this. Yeah.
They've got the energy for it.
So he's the one who's identified these short-term, long-term problems. So a long-term we understand is we need to switch to carbon neutral or zero net energy. But in the short term, how do we mitigate? How do we move away from coal quickly, so therefore we reduce our impact dramatically to basically buy us more time to develop the technology that we need to be able to store this power and have energy on demand? Because that's our problem at the moment. So basically, his theory is in the short term, we need to get off coal as quick as possible. And the quickest way to do that is using natural gas.
Okay.
So the reason for natural gas is it is such a contentious issue. And that's because fracking, fracking.
The F word.
The F word, the big old F word.
The F word that everyone's afraid of.
Yeah, and the problem with that, my understanding is, it's not necessarily the fracking, the act of fracking itself that is bad. It's the weaknesses in the structure that can cause issues and toxins to be released and water tables to be polluted.
Okay, so from the actual act of fracking, there's a flow-on effect.
There's a flow-on effect. So that there is a possibility to get it perfect, and there is no flow-on effect, but you can't guarantee that.
So there is a possibility that it can work.
Yes. Yeah.
But things go wrong.
Yeah. So with current modelling, they understand that we can last on natural gas for hundreds of years. But the problem with natural gas is it's not a carbon neutral alternative.
Okay.
You still are burning energy that is a natural resource. It's not sustainable, but it has a factor of 2 reduction in carbon emissions.
Okay.
So it's a great alternative. It's a cleaner alternative. It's a cleaner energy,
Cleaner
but it's
alternative to coal.
to coal.
Yep.
It's not sustainable. And the reason why Professor Zubak has said we need to make this transition is because it's easy to do. So in the short term goal would be to change over to natural gas because we already have the infrastructure to do it. We already have the technology to keep society operating and to keep energy on demand whilst we develop up this technology, and we live in a delicate balance with the economy. We can see with the current outbreak of coronavirus or COVID-19 that Australia is, we're not very hard hit in the sense that we don't have a lot of illness in the country, but our economy is taking a massive hit.
Yeah.
And there's a threat that we could go into a recession. So you can see that one tiny little problem in the world can break our economy.
Disrupt the whole thing.
Yeah.
Can
So
disrupt the whole house of cards.
yeah, exactly. So it's a delicate balance of changing over to this technology, keeping the economy going and keeping jobs, people employed, et cetera, et cetera. So one of the solutions is this short-term goal of going over to natural gas. However, there is a threat that we would then just replace coal with natural gas and just become dependent on natural gas.
Right.
And then our motivation to go to decarbonize energy is lost.
Right.
So that's the biggest threat.
Yeah.
But a short-term solution, it's the perfect answer. Okay?
In the short term.
In
but
the short term.
long term,
In the
yeah.
long term.
So should we be more focused on the short-term goals that we can achieve now and get started on now, or is it incorporating both in terms of our planning? Short term, we do this, and then stepping stone onto this.
Yeah. And that's the biggest question in politics right now.
Yeah.
That's the biggest question right now. My opinion is I think we should do what we can now
Yeah.
to try to mitigate climate change as much as possible. That is our goal.
Yeah.
So if we have the technology and the resource available to do that, I think as a short-term goal, whilst we pump 100% of our energy, our personal mind energy and motivation into finding alternative carbon neutral solutions and developing that technology, I think it's a good idea. Anything we can do, we should be doing.
Yeah.
And this becomes particularly important for countries that are highly dependent on electricity, like China. So China is the manufacturer of the world. It's the factory of the world. For it and the economy to continue to operate, we need China to sustain itself in energy, but we need them to, they're one of the biggest polluters in the world, so we need them to reduce their energy drastically. So how do we do that? How do we propose something that's cheap and easy for them to do also? So that's where this debate about natural gas comes in. And from a purely scientific point of view, if you remove emotion from it, you can see how it would play out and how it would work. But then as soon as you insert, human influence, we can see where the issues lie, the social issues would lie, and there's still environmental issues. So, it's not the answer. And I'm not saying it's the answer, but it's an alternative solution to help us get to the answer.
Yeah. And I don't think it's as simple as providing an answer per se. It's there's like a specific outcome that we're going to achieve. It's like, okay, set it and forget it.
Yeah.
There's always going to be challenges along the way, and it becomes like more of a process. And you can sort of almost use the analogy of a city. It's never finished, and you can sort of apply that to energy per se. It's never finished. It's never the one solution, and we know that our current systems of energy aren't the solution.
Yeah.
We can't operate on this, so we need to modify it. We need to change it.
Yeah.
And that can also be applied to renewable energies. Like, we don't know because we're not 100% operating off renewable energy. Maybe there's hidden dangers with with that.
Yeah.
You
Well,
know,
that's
that
it.
we can't see, but
Yeah.
we're focused on it because it does, you know, seem like an attractive and alternate solution to what
Yeah.
we're currently doing right now.
Yeah.
And that's not to say that we shouldn't pursue that.
Yeah, exactly. But it's just we're venturing into unknown territory, and like
Yeah.
we have done in the past, we learn as we go. With humanity, we discover as we go. The biggest advantage, though, of that is that we have learnt to test and trial before we implement, which is good. Like you think of the coronavirus, COVID-19, that they think they've found a vaccination for it, but everyone's like, well, give it to us. And they're like, no, because it hasn't been tested and trialed. It needs to be tested and trialed before we can release it to the population.
Yeah.
So we're learning slowly. We're
Slowly learning.
Yes, slowly
That's the
learning.
best we can do. Day to day, just learn as much as we can.
Yeah, but the main thing is, as long as we are learning, that gives us faith in humanity. It gives me faith in humanity.
Yeah.
But anyway, so so short-term goal, let's say one of the solutions could be natural gas. It's already happening. It's greener, but it's not green. It's easy to do and doesn't require much changeover. Good for large coal-dependent countries like China to drastically reduce their greenhouse gas emissions. And it's to be used only as a transition fuel. Okay? So the long-term goal then is switching from natural gas to decarbonised energy. So to understand where we're at with decarbonised energy, so...
Love that word, decarbonised.
Yeah, I know. I had to write it down. I found it in my research. I was like, ooh.
That sends chills.
Yeah. So then now we start relying on greenhouse decarbonised energy and energy that potentially not only doesn't produce greenhouse gas emissions, but potentially pulls greenhouse gases from our atmosphere, hence trying to reverse climate change. So capturing carbon, I'll just quickly talk about capturing carbon, which Sally Benson, also a professor of natural resources engineering at Stanford University, she has said that we need to capture the carbon dioxide in the atmosphere and store it deep underground so it cannot be released, because that's essentially where it has come from, coal, decarbonised storage deep underground. By doing that, we need to essentially pull it from the atmosphere, scrape it off the side of chimneys and liquefy it, compress it so much so we can liquefy it, so therefore it's no longer a gas, so it can't easily be released, and then store it back into the earth, which is, if you think of the earth as one big battery, and coal so far has been that carbon, that embodied energy that we've been pulling out of the earth,
like the fuel,
out of our battery and burning. So we're essentially reversing that process.
It's almost like a circular economy. You know,
exactly.
Pulling it out and then storing it. But we haven't. Put
the idea is we're going to put it back in and then leave it and not touch it anymore, because ooh, that was bad. Let's put that back. It's a completely different form. It's gone from a solid to a liquid, but it's done. We learned by our mistake. It's all good.
Like throwing up your papers on a Thursday afternoon and saying, "Oh, actually, I need these for tomorrow."
Yeah, exactly. Yep. So anyway, so then that basically says that we can actually produce negative emissions.
Okay.
So actually
in a positive.
So that we can be carbon negative, which is a positive thing. So what do we do? How do we produce our electricity then? And one of the biggest technologies, which everyone should have heard of, is solar. Okay, so the reason why solar is at the forefront of leading the renewable energies is because the technology has been developing over the last 10 years, and it is from 10 years ago to now, its cost has got so drastically lower that it's on par with coal at the moment.
It's fantastic.
Yeah, it is fantastic.
Yeah.
But then to produce solar electricity, the efficiency, how much we can produce, is on par with coal. Like, okay, the question arises, well, why don't we just switch to, this brilliant alternative, solar energy? It's constantly coming from the sun. Well, yes, it's on par with coal, but it's still not as efficient as coal.
Okay.
And the reason why is because it comes down to infrastructure, what we've done, energy storage, which is what I'll get into with battery technology that's evolving, and also energy on demand. The sun's not shining, you don't have electricity going into your electricity grid, therefore that energy on demand, that need for us to operate, is not there. So basically, for it to take over coal as a leading energy resource, we need to lower the cost of materials to produce it. We need to have a high abundance of materials available so we can mass produce the solar panels. And we need to simplify the process of manufacturing. And so this information has come from Professor Yi Xu. He's a professor of material sciences and engineering at Stanford University. Again, all these guys are from Stanford University because they are just on the ball with this.
Yeah, they're putting a lot of energy into this.
Yeah. They've really spelt out the problem and what we need to do, which is really great. Oh, I got what you just said. Putting a lot of energy. Oh, damn.
Penny just dropped.
Damn. Sorry. I haven't finished my coffee for the morning.
No, that's really interesting though, because I'm wondering also about the flow-on effects of even solar energy. Like, what happens to a solar panel once it becomes decommissioned? If it does become decommissioned, like, does it have a lifespan?
Oh yeah, so you're talking about the continual life cycle.
And what can we do with that? Like, and to flow on from our last episode of repurposing, can that actually be repurposed into something else or repurposed back into the same system? So I think, it's really, everything's coming full circle in terms of like...
Excuse the pun. You're just full of the puns today.
The puns today. What's in this coffee? But I think that's the aspirations between all of these systems, is to create this circular economy. But
create
also,
this closed loop is essentially the goal.
The closed loop is such a powerful symbol for, to take it as from a symbol of it being the planet, being a closed loop. It goes in rotations. And
it just makes so much sense.
It makes so much sense.
Everything's round. Everything's a circle.
But I think one of the big things that I identify as a huge hurdle is the economical gain, because we need an economical return on these things, and how can we actually integrate that into our current system?
And that's the political problems, isn't it?
Yeah.
And I'm glad I'm not a politician, because that's big. There are some big questions to answer.
Yeah.
So basically with solar, they are making some advancements in that technology, and it's really exciting. So they're talking about what's coming soon in solar energy is photovoltaic efficiency increasing. So we've come so far in the last 10 years to being relatively efficient to match the efficiency of coal, which is where we're at today, which is fantastic. Right? But they're going to become even more efficient. So that's good. That's a tick box into the solar farming industry. And they're also going to become thinner and flexible.
Okay.
Which is good. So if you think of the materiality, both of us coming from an architectural background, what we could do with a flexible solar panel, and it basically being a wallpaper. Think of the extra energy in places that we couldn't. Yeah, exactly. Wow. We couldn't capture that energy before, but now we can.
Yeah. Because typically, I would think of a solar panel being this, extra structure or like this extra structure that you just slap onto the top of a building.
Yeah, or you make it a pavilion or something. You make a full structure out of it.
And it's very prominent that it's there. So now it's like it's becoming its own sort of category of building material. You can actually do more with it.
Yeah. So then there's potential that, okay, we have a west wall that's completely west facing, northwest facing for argument's sake, there's a lot of embodied energy that wall is capturing. Potentially these photovoltaics can capture that energy and turn it into energy that we can use, therefore creating more energy for the reliability. But then it comes back to the problem, okay, how do you store that energy? Again, so for that energy on demand, that's great that we're producing so much of this energy during the time in which it's being captured, and there's so much energy pouring into the grid. That's fantastic, we can rely on it. The sun's not shining for days at a time. It's England, what do we do? So that's where we come down to the battery. So this is an area of research that I'm super interested in, and I think everyone should be watching this space because so much energy and resources are being embodied into this section right now that it's just growing rapidly. And like so many universities, University of Adelaide is one of them, who are researching this topic, essentially this problem that we're facing now, to try to make, because this is what becoming completely carbon neutral is relying on. Storage of energy. How do we store it, right? So and I'm completely going over the fact that there's things like hydroelectricity and things that are constantly flowing, and tidal power, and there's ways of capturing energy through them, but then you've got to think of the local climatic impacts that they have. So that's a reason why I haven't discussed them in full today as a complete alternative, because there are local issues embodied in them.
And I suppose that would be one of the ways that, environment, from a geographical point of view, that these countries can overcome their energy issues. Like, for instance, England, always being overcast or constantly being overcast. Can they explore different ways of
but then again,
energy
you think geographically
hydro or
something
like
wind.
That. So it's really adapting to the place.
And then it comes down to the fact that geographically they're quite close to sunny countries like Spain, for instance. France, areas of France where they've already started putting photovoltaics on their roads. So energy geographically could potentially travel that distance.
And that could be one way of actually solving the economical issue that we were discussing before. How can we actually make this integrate into our lifestyles and actually, economically profit from this? A country could sell their energy, their renewable energy, to another country that doesn't have that. That opportunity to create solar power.
Exactly. And vice versa. The wind may be blowing in the UK, and then the sun's not shining in Spain, so therefore they can swap that.
It becomes a share economy.
A share economy, of electricity. And that's amazing. That's an amazing utopia that we can imagine.
That's a massive, aspiration to go towards as a global community. To be sharing everything. Not just thinking of ourselves as like individual countries. Okay, let's help out our brothers and sisters over the border. Just because they haven't had sun in 2 weeks.
Exactly. But hopefully they won't necessarily need the help, because battery technology will be so advanced. It's energy storage, which is a battery. Essentially, the definition of a battery is energy storage. We think of a battery as that little thing you put in your remote-controlled car. That's one definition of a battery, but like one physical form of a battery. But there's many forms. It just means energy being stored. So at the moment, we rely on the biggest advancement in technology battery-wise is the lithium-ion battery. And we're becoming very dependent on that at the moment. But the problem with that is there's a low embodied energy. So it is what you call I wrote it down, but that's okay. Basically, you have this formula where energy density. Okay, so you in less weight you can achieve more energy. That's the ultimate goal.
Okay. Yep.
Because especially when it comes to things like transport, you need to be able to push a car or a train forward. To do that, you need embodied energy or battery storage. If you add additional weight, then that's going to mean that it's going to chew more energy to push it forward, so therefore you need more batteries, which adds more weight, and then it's this kind of,
so the goal is to make it as light as possible.
Light as possible and
Right.
have the
Efficient
maximum
as possible.
energy density. Yeah.
Yeah.
Light as possible, as efficient as possible.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's basically what they're trying to, the biggest problem they're trying to solve at the moment when it comes to batteries. So there's the lithium sulfur battery, which is looking quite promising. So that's not lithium ion, but lithium sulfur. That comes down to lifetime of the battery. So the problem with lithium ion, it has a really short lifespan in the comparison of the embodied energy within that battery to actually create that battery through getting the resources of lithium and iron through mining to then create this battery. It has a relatively short lifespan for that.
Okay. Yep.
So what happens is basically the gel or the liquid within the battery starts decomposing in the most simplest term, and it can't reach its maximum charge potential anymore. So therefore, the embodied energy becomes, lower. So therefore, it's essentially useless.
Right. It's like using your phone battery over and over again.
It's going to get worse and worse and worse.
Efficiencies over time.
And that's because it's a lithium-ion battery.
Right.
So lithium-sulfur batteries help solve this problem, but they're still using lithium. Sulfur is relatively easy to come across, but lithium is still a high-embodied energy resource.
Yeah.
So IBM is producing a battery that is sourced from seawater and outperforms lithium-ion.
Interesting.
As well. There's something called the sand battery, which gives 3 times more battery life.
Huh.
Produced by sand.
Yeah.
Which
the name implies.
Yep. There's the potential of capturing energy from Wi-Fi as well to recharge these batteries.
Wow.
Yep, which is pretty amazing.
Whoa, that's like a Nikola Tesla vision.
Yeah, exactly.
Wireless electricity.
Yeah. There is wireless technology, wireless electricity technology. We know that we have like pads that we can put our phone on and charge our phone through wireless technology, but there's actually more advanced wireless technology where we walk into our room and our phones will be charging through the Wi-Fi network. And stuff like
that's
that.
fascinating.
Yeah, so that they already have that technology and they're developing it up to become more economically viable. Yeah. So there's that. There's the gold nanowire battery as well, which is looking promising in terms of energy density, I think, from my understanding. However, gold is a really valuable resource, so therefore it's not exactly economically viable. And then there's the solid-state lithium-ion battery, which basically removes the problem of where we have that gel that's breaking down. It removes that issue.
Okay.
So therefore the battery life is potentially endless. But again, there's still a lot of embodied energy in producing that, and there's still mining required.
Yep.
And then there's the graphite battery, and that is my most favorite battery of all time. Yeah, I feel that it has the most potential, and it does have the potential to solve all of these issues because it has the highest or one of the highest embodied energy rates. Sorry, not embodied energy rates, highest energy density. So it's super lightweight, super cheap to make, and like 1/10 of the cost of a lithium-ion battery to make.
Oh, right.
It's dependent on graphite, which is literally in your pencil. So it's so readily available. Graphite is such a readily available resource. It's super cheap to come across, and super efficient, and can hold so much more energy.
Wow.
So that particular graphite, that particular battery, the graphite battery, has the potential to solve this issue.
Wow.
So if we can employ graphite batteries into transportation, then essentially what we get is a lot lighter of a weight, a lot more energy. Therefore, range anxiety, for instance, in cars dissipates.
Yeah.
There's no need to produce gasoline vehicles anymore or oil-dependent vehicles anymore.
Yeah.
So therefore, the manufacturing process becomes a lot simpler. Therefore, there's a lot more resources being used to make transport. Therefore, transport becomes a lot cheaper. Therefore, there's a lot less maintenance, and it just has potential to completely change the way our society operates. And I mean transport as in big transport, like your everyday car, which is great, like electric vehicles, but also AVs, but also trains and aeroplanes and buses and all of that. Imagine if all of that was running on a closed circuit of electricity.
Wow.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
That's amazing. And the good thing with graphite is, my understanding is it doesn't break down. So the battery life cycle is potentially endless. Yeah. So you put a battery in something, and the only thing that will eventually break down is the physicality of it. So movement and, the potential that the casing might crack, in which case they harness the graphite again and they just rebuild the battery.
Seems so simple, hey?
Yeah, exactly. See, I make it sound so simple, but I'm sure there's so much more complications around it.
My initial thoughts are, why don't we just get started right now?
Yeah. Do it. Well, they are, and
as
that's
soon as this podcast is over,
yeah.
let's just hit the ground.
Yeah. But you can actually buy graphite battery packs now.
Okay.
So it's been commercialized very recently. I think in 2019 it was commercialized, but it's still an evolving technology, and it has all this potential. So a lot of resources being pumped into it at the moment. So we're going to start seeing it in more, like larger battery storage requirements, such as AVs.
And,
yeah,
on a personal
exactly.
scale.
Yeah. So Professor Stephen Chu, also from the Stanford University, he's a professor of physics of molecular and cellular physiology. Whoa, imagine having that title.
Jesus. What a resume.
I know. But he's saying that we have the potential for all transportation to be electrified by the end of the century.
Wow.
So electrified by the end of the century. So that's dismissing like hydrogen, like interim, similar to like the natural gas solution. There'll be interim solutions in between, but all of technology, all of transport, you think of anything that you use to get from A to B will be electrified.
That's phenomenal.
Yeah.
Like, what a world to live in, like, where everything, is electrified. Doesn't have this exhaust pipe that's pumping out plumes of smoke. Like that word.
Yeah. And not even that, like, also, it's so much more efficient. It's quiet. It like opens up a whole other like availability of thinking. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
And I'm even like, it's relatively like a new sort of technology that's come about in these past few years, and I'm still blown away by just seeing electric cars roll down the street, and they're just so silent
and so amazing. Actually, Alex, my fiance, she said she was in the car park yesterday and she saw a car approaching her, and she was on her phone, so she was waiting for it to go past, and then she's like, something's not right here, and looked up, and the car had like significantly past her, and she's like, oh shit, that was so weird. I didn't even like, because you start associating that sound.
Yeah.
So in this really weird transition period where you're like expecting to hear a car pass you, but all of a sudden you don't,
It's like we need those reverse sensors on our
body.
To
or just
notify.
look up from your phone, people. It's easy.
It's either that, That's one solution.
In Alex's defense, she was, I think, messaging me, and so that's okay.
Oh,
and she wasn't crossing the road; she was stagnant, so she was safe. But so energy is a really awesome topic when we think of sustainability, and is really at the core of becoming a completely carbon neutral society, because we've identified it is a need for society to operate. So that is one of the biggest hurdles we're going to face moving forward.
Wow.
So I would suggest that everyone watches this space definitely in the sense of batteries, but also other technologies and photovoltaics. But yeah, definitely everyone should be keeping an eye on this space, because it's going to literally change the way we live.
Well, it sounds like it already is changing the way we live, and it's definitely making a splash in the energy sector, and it's really influencing people's behaviors and people's mindset about how we treat energy. It seems to be one of those things that has come to the forefront of our minds. It's one of those things that, we kind of left it, we just accepted whatever was the system we should accept, but now it's becoming, all right, we need to rethink this because the current system isn't working. And we're developing technologies that are enabling us to do that and get to our goals of renewable energy and carbon neutral energy. So it'll be interesting
to hear what other people think. So listeners, please post on our socials how you envision the world going with this carbon.
Share your energy with us.
Give us your energy.
Give us your thoughts on where the future of energy is going for you personally, and
what you're most excited about. Let's get this conversation going about how exciting this potential is. Maybe highlight some issues. We like to steer away, as you probably read on our socials, we like to steer away from politics as much as possible, because we like to have constructive conversation. But please hit us up and let us know what you think. And if you know of a battery technology, actually one of them that I found, imagine this, okay? I'm doing an elevator pitch for these people. I don't even know who they are. But imagine never having to charge your phone or any of your devices.
Wow.
So there's this battery they're developing, which is basically...
That's like infinite.
Complete
energy.
It's like kinetic, I think, but like a closed circuit. So your screen uses your battery to produce light, which is energy. So energy is never lost, it's just transition. So it's about then capturing that energy again and completing this closed circuit.
Oh my God.
To basically buying a device and never having to charge it.
There you have it.
Which is great.
Wow.
Like when you think about that, that requires less energy, therefore, that we need to produce it within the grid to then charge these devices. So that's why it's still really important, although we're going to be transitioning to this closed circuit of energy through, environmentally sustainable resources, it's still really important to have this energy efficiency. So therefore, we don't have as much we don't need to produce as much electricity. So therefore, we don't need to rely on our natural resources to produce the products that then produce the electricity.
Wow.
Anyway.
There you have it. There you have it.
Yep.
Wow.
So energy, right?
Energy.
Am I right?
Let's just...
Am I right? Energy.
Let's go towards that energy efficiency, and we're really heading into that direction, but we need to make it happen in the next century.
At least.
Basically, it seems like so far away, but it's so close at the same time. So that's one way we can actually accelerate this process by having a chat, about this topic. And sharing our energy with each other, and both in a conversation and literally with
sharing our
electrified
energy. Okay, well look, we better wrap it up, because I can literally talk about this topic forever. There's so many things that keep popping into my mind. So let's just not bore you all and let you go like us on Facebook or Instagram. Hit us up on socials. As always, my research links will be in the description wherever you get your podcasts or show notes. So make sure you continue the conversation.
Righto.
All right.
Take
Peace
care.
out.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Thanks for tuning into this episode. We hope you've enjoyed this chat. Please feel free to join the discussion by finding us on social media. Here we really encourage our listeners to get involved and extend the conversation. If there's a topic that you'd like us to talk about, drop us a line. From the Habichatters, have a good day.